Okay, let me tell you something about the launcher. The launcher was made for developers specifically to make it easier for them to get up and running with OpenShift so that they could easily create new applications and get them running really quickly. For that, we made an application where a developer could go to a hosted web UI and a website where they could then generate new applications or import existing ones. Those applications would then get deployed for them on their own GitHub account and also on an OpenShift cluster. The same thing could then also be done with a command line interface or with IDE plugins. So let's see what the application actually looks like, which is this. This is the main page where you can see the three options of either creating a new application, deploying an example application, or importing an existing application. So for now, let's start with creating a new application. To create a new application, you can choose to have a front end or back end or both. So in this case, let's say that we want a front end, and it gives us an option of React, Angular, and Vue. Let's say React, and just go with that. And then we also say that we want a backend. For the backend, we can choose from different runtimes. So let's say we have like .NET here, Node, Spring Boot, Thorntail, etc. Let's choose Quarkus. And for the backends, we actually have certain capabilities that you can select. A capability is simply put like a very simple vertical stack, a complete vertical stack. So if you would choose a relational persistence, you would get a database, code to exit the database, and all the necessary configuration to link the two so that the code can access the database. And health checks, which are always selected, and HTTP API, which then would also be a fully functioning example. In this case, let's just check the HTTP API and go with that. It also says here that you can configure a welcome application, which is something that like an extra application or front-end application that the user gets that shows what their newly created application can do and how it works. For now, we go with the rest. The rest is automatically it's selected a new GitHub repository for me in my account, and it already pre-selected my local OpenShift cluster. So let's go ahead and launch this. It takes a couple of seconds. It says that it's creating the GitHub repository for me, an OpenShift project, and it sets up the builds, etc. Okay, so if we now look here in the OpenShift console, we see that we have a newly created project. And what we can see is that it's busy building the front end and the back ends. You can see it here, it's downloading stuff from Maven and whatever it's like. So it's building the code that we'll be running. So let's wait for a while that happens. So as we can see, the backend is almost ready starting. The build was done and it now seems to work fine. So while the front end is still building, we'll go and have a take a look at the welcome app that was already installed for us, which we can use to see what application was created for us. So it has all kinds of information about the application that was just built and up and running. So there's a link to the application URL, there's a link to its code base, so which we also saw here. It's the same code base here. Splendid love. And the same here. We have some information about our front end, for example, which image is being used to build and run the application. For the backend, the same thing. It's a Quarkus application. This is the image that's being used. We have the route where you can access those applications, the front end and the back end. And here, a little bit more interesting, you see some explanation about the health checks and the REST API with a way to test them. So if I click on execute here, we get an up, which then tells us that everything is okay. And the same for the REST API. If I click on execute here, I get an hello world here. So that all seems to work perfectly fine. If you go back to the console, I can also go to the backend itself. Oh, it says backend. Oh well, yeah, that's because it's a REST API, so it's actually exactly it's right there. So this is the explanation of how a new application gets generated from the moment that you start in the application. You say that you want to generate your application until getting an actually working application with the code and everything. It just takes a couple of minutes. So if we now go back to the launcher, we go to the next option, which is deploy an example application. So where the previous option was for creating a new application where you yourself say like, okay, what kind of elements do I want for my application? These are actually fully built applications. So there's no, besides selecting which applications you want to install, there is no other option. So what you get here is like you select the runtime that you want to use for your new application. Let's say, for example, Spring Boot, and then we see our options here. So CRUD, cache, circuit breaker, externalized configuration, etc. You will also see some of them that we already saw in the creator, which are, for example, CRUD and REST API, and that's actually the point. So where here, if you select I want the REST API example, you only get that. If I say I want the CRUD one, you will only get the CRUD application. And this is the option that we first built, and people were very happy with that, but after a while it often resulted that they said like, hey, actually I would like an application that has both the CRUD and the REST API and the health checks and some other things. And either that application would have to exist in this list, or there was just no way to do that. So these are only fully build fully functioning example applications, but they're unchangeable. They're completely immutable, and they're if you install them the first time, they will be the same as the 10th or the 100th time. So, okay, let's say that we want a CRUD application for Spring Boot, and let's launch it. And it, as you see, it goes through the same steps. So it creates a GitHub repository for me. It sets up it on OpenShift. So now I have a new Git repository for a Spring Boot application doing with a CRUD with a database and with a CRUD code example. So if I look at the web console, we should now have a new project here. Again, the code here is building, and the database is already up and running. So we can again wait for a while that until this is ready. So it's almost done. Come on, you can do it. And there it is. So let's see. And here we have like a small demo where we can say it like or remove or whatever. So here we have like in a couple of minutes we have an application that is a fully working database CRUD example. Okay, so then we could go back to the last option, which is to import an existing application. Here we can actually take a GitHub repository from a third-party application, put that here, and it will actually analyze the code there, and it will say like, hey, this seems to be Node.js code, so let's use this code, this builder for you. It does some more. It says like, well, let's say this environment variable is probably necessary to make things run, so let's go with that and say launch again. In this case, the launch is a lot easier because it doesn't need to create a GitHub repository for you. It only does the OpenShift part. So now we have an inquisitive sponge here, which should be the code that was just being imported from that Heroku repository. So let's see. It's still building, but that's already pretty quick. So let's see if we just wait for a moment to see it finish. It is, and it's already up and running. And if we go here, then we see a marvelous hello world example. So that's it for the three functions in our main web application. I'd like to show a very last thing, because if we go to the one of the repositories that was created for us, it actually has some explanation here on what to do for inner loop development. So if I go to that project here, so this one was with an application that has a REST API, with, if I click on execute, it says hello world. Now, if I would go into the code for this one and I'd say like, give me the backend, and let's go to the code where it actually says that, and what I wanted to do is let's clone this. Then let's go into that directory, and it has this gap command here, which is a small script that we added to do some basic development stuff for independent of the runtime that you chose. So, for example, of course, the runtimes can be Node, it can be .NET, it can be Java, or whatever. So, and all of them have different ways of building things. So, to make things a little bit easier, just for this kind of situation where you need to get up and running very quickly, we have this command which actually says, like, if you say I want to build something, then it will build the front end and back end for you. And it does that regardless of the kind of building that it needs to do. So if we then look at the, okay, let's stop this for a moment. I'm not really interested in the front end for now. Let's go into the back end. And what I want to do is I want to change the message, the default message. So I want to go into the code. I want to change this, for example, to IBM. And now I want to build this again. But now I want to push this code to the project that we have here, which is this one. So how do I do that? Well, I first need to make sure that I'm connected to the right project. So let's log into that one. And now what I can do is I can say gap push. I just made a change. I built the code. I can now say gap push. And it now uploaded that code to the compiled code to the server, and this build is now running. It's called a build, even though it's not really building anything, but that's it's still building in OpenShift terminology. So let's wait for a moment for that to finish. Okay, and there we are. And the pod has restarted, so let's see what and look at that. It says hello IBM. So that's where we showed that there is also a way to do inner loop development for the developer, where they can just make changes and push that to the same project. Well, for me, that's it for now. Thank you, and see you all soon.